Welcome to the Family Room Mission podcast. I'm Ashley Tilford. Today we're going to be talking about how to rebuild intimacy and trust. Intimacy and trust are two big pain points in marriages. A lot of times we see couples who are fighting over money, or they're fighting over lack of communication, or they're fighting over intimacy. And intimacy is something that our society, our culture as a whole, is not very good at. We struggle with how to be intimate and vulnerable with people when the reality is we want them to see us in a certain way, in a certain light, because we don't really like ourselves. And so when we talk about intimacy and trust in marriage, it goes even to a deeper level because the marriage is supposed to be the first example of the covenant relationship that we have, and the best example, really, of the covenant relationship we have with God in a physical form that we can see, that we can identify, that we can know. And so, if we're struggling with intimacy with our spouse, a lot of times that's indication that we're struggling with intimacy with God. And that stems from a lack of intimacy, again, with ourselves, a lack of knowing who we are, understanding our identity, and healing through some of the issues in our lives that we have. We've talked on previous episodes about emotional healing and how do you process through trauma so that you can deal with your emotions. If your home is a place of volatility, if you are struggling with your home being a battlefield because of these emotional outbursts, either within yourself, your spouse, or your children, you have to start somewhere. You have to start with identifying the emotion and understanding that they're indicators of a bigger problem that need to be dealt with. Today, let's talk about trust first, because this is a big starting point for intimacy. When you don't trust someone, you are not intimate with them. That's just bottom line. What we have to understand about trust is that trust is an emotion. It is not something that you can will yourself to do. You cannot make yourself trust someone. They earn your trust through little acts, either for or against you. They'll either gain your trust through these little acts, or they will decrease your trust through these little acts. And so, understanding that trust is an emotion is pivotal in a relationship with our spouses, because you cannot make yourself trust them. It's the bottom line. You either trust them or you don't. You have a strong sense of trust or you have a strong sense of distrust. And understanding that about relationships in general will help you understand how you interact with other people, yourself, or your spouse. So, in regards to your spouse and trusting them, take a minute and think, do I trust my spouse? Do I trust them with the physical things? Do I trust them with my emotional needs? Do I trust them with my spiritual things? And when we start to look at our relationship with our spouse in these categories and identify and be honest and truthful with ourselves to say, you know what? I don't really trust my spouse with my emotions. Then we can start somewhere. Then you can get to a place where you can say, okay, I'm going to be honest with myself that I don't trust you in this area. But then guess what? I'm going to be also honest with you. I'm going to be honest and have these conversations with my spouse to say, I don't trust you. I don't trust you in your spending habits. I don't trust you with my emotions. I don't trust you with our kids. And then you can get somewhere, because at that point, you are able to be opening up intimacy, because now it's not about protecting yourself and pretending you trust them when really you don't. It's about being open and honest and vulnerable with them that you don't trust them. And look, this is a hard conversation. It's going to be a hard conversation to have, because nobody likes to hear that somebody doesn't trust them, especially if it's your spouse. Think about it if the shoe were on the other foot. If your spouse told you, hey, I don't really trust you with, the grocery spending or whatever. Ouch, that kind of hurts. But are we willing to take the hard look at ourselves to not get offended that someone doesn't trust us, but to take the perspective of, okay, this is an area of growth for our relationship? And so many times, I see it in so many marriages that people just get offended. They just get offended. They shut down. They run away. They retaliate because they're not willing to do the hard things and say the hard things about themselves that they already don't like. Maybe you already know that you spend too much at the grocery store, and to have your husband come and say, "Hey, I don't trust you to budget correctly. What can we do to, fix this type thing?" That hurts. That's no fun. I can remember when I was first becoming a follower of Christ. Again, if you've heard my testimony, I had an in-home daycare at the time, had 7 kids under the age of 3, was always angry, always frustrated, always yelling. And I can remember one day my husband came to me and he said, "Do you love me?" He was being very honest and intimate, essentially, in being vulnerable. "Do you love me?" And then my thought process of course I love you. Don't you know? How could you not know that I love you? Like, that's the stupidest question I've ever heard in my life. But as I pondered it and thought about it, I realized there was no evidence. There was no evidence that I actually loved him. I wasn't touching him. I wasn't kissing him. I wasn't doing anything for him. I wasn't writing him little nub notes. I was just angry all the time. And in my heart, I loved him, but I didn't do anything about it. And so, from his perspective, he didn't trust that I loved him because there was nothing that he could see that I was doing to show him that I loved him. And that was a turning point in our marriage. I took the responsibility and said, "You know what? You're right. I haven't been doing anything to show you that I love you. I do love you, but I can see where you don't trust me that I love you." And so I began making little changes here and there. It was hard for me because I really struggled with intimacy and have for a really long time. We'll talk about that next, but I struggled. I don't like physical touch. I don't like PDA. And so I'm a writer, and so I started writing love notes, or I started being a little more intentional with serving him a meal, or, sitting down to take 5 minutes to talk to him while he ate before he went to work or something like that, right? And so I started realizing that I had a responsibility to help build the trust in our relationship in the place where he didn't know if he could trust. And this is important with your spouse, to have the hard conversations that are uncomfortable, to try to keep yourself from getting offended and looking at it from a different perspective, from the perspective of your spouse. And when you do that, you are able to start cultivating a little trust. There was a book or something a few years back that talked about the rice bowl and adding rice to your spouse's rice bowl. I'll have to look that up to see where that is. But you either give rice or you take rice out of the bowl. And trust is like that. You are either cultivating trust or you are negating trust. And if there is a little more and more rice getting out of the bowl, there's only a little bit left, then it is right and it is proper for your spouse to come to you to say, "Hey, I don't trust you with what's left in my rice bowl. I don't trust that you have me at the forefront of your mind. I don't trust that you care about this relationship." And that can open up the conversations that will lead to intimacy. Intimacy is vulnerability, authenticity, connection. And when we are lacking in trust, we will be inevitably lacking in intimacy. If you don't trust someone, you're not going to open up and try to connect with them. And it's important for us as Christ followers to identify the places in our hearts and minds where we don't trust our spouse, but also where we don't trust God. A lot of times, like I said, trust is an emotion, and we don't feel that trust for God. So then it just automatically causes us not to do anything to support that trust. And so, are we vulnerable and authentic enough in our relationship with God to be able to have the same kind of conversation with Him to say, God, I don't know if I can trust you with these things that matter. And when we can do that, opens up a whole new level of intimacy with God too, because we are saying, I don't trust you, but I want you to show me that I can trust you. I think that's in Mark chapter 9, where the father brings the son that has a deaf and dumb spirit and to Jesus. And he's like, I want you to heal him, but I don't know if I can, if you can, so help cure my unbelief. And when we begin to wrestle with our distrust of God from that position of, I'm going to give this to you because I want you to help me trust you more. Well, He's going to open all kinds of doors for us to be more intimate with Him, to be more vulnerable with Him. He'll show us that He is trustworthy because that is His nature, and it just opens all these doors. Well, it's the same with our spouse. If we are in covenant with our spouse, just as we're in covenant with God, we can mirror the two together to say, okay, if I'm struggling with intimacy with God, if I'm feeling like I cannot connect to God in worship or in the Bible or in prayer, what does that really mean? How can I fix it? I'm trying to do all the things right. What is the root? Well, the root is distrust. The root of a lack of intimacy is distrust. So I would encourage you today that if you are struggling with intimacy in your marriage, really look at your heart and identify the places where you don't trust your spouse. And from there, humble yourself, be willing to address those places of distrust with your husband, trusting God to protect you, provide for you within those conversations as well, because really that stems from a lack of trust in God. So when you have those heart connections, or when you have, we'll go back. So when you can identify the areas where you don't trust your spouse, you can have those conversations where you are identifying and confessing those areas of distress. That opens the door for you to be able to rebuild intimacy, because then your spouse can show you that he or she is trustworthy. And this parallels our relationship with the Father, is that if you are struggling with intimacy with God, maybe it's time for you to identify the areas where you don't trust Him, confess those to Him, and allow Him to show you that He is trustworthy so that you can rebuild intimacy. When we start viewing our lives and our relationships in these ways, we are able to help turn our family rooms that are battlefields right now and places of discomfort and struggle and stress to places where, yes, we have to push through the productive pain of discomfort, having these hard conversations of wrestling with ourselves and who we wish we could be and who we actually are, so that we can create a peaceful, restful family room in our home.